Sunday Adelaja here on a special. I want to do a special video speech or special video talk with my friends and my colleagues and people who trust me and who follow me and who want to know what is happening with Sunday Adelaja. I've been famous for talking loudly and boldly about the fact that I'm going to Nigeria soon, and that I'm going to make a difference, and that when I get to Nigeria, Nigeria is definitely going to be different, and the country is going to change for the better. And I have actually betted with a lot of people that if I'm there for 10 years, from the time I land in Nigeria, the next 10 years, Nigeria will be, the next 10 years, if Nigeria doesn't change, you can stone me or chase me out of the city or tell me that I'm not a man of God, because I know that God has helped me and has prepared me to know what it takes to change Nigeria. But it's not going to be me alone. There are going to be a lot of people in the process, but I just know what I bring to the table, so I can only talk for myself. Now, why then is it that I am still here in the Ukraine? A lot of people sometimes, often actually, almost on a daily basis, I receive messages that tend to challenge me that why you still sitting down there in the Ukraine when you say you know how to make Nigeria a better place. Come back home and do something. Some people do that just to spite me, while other people do that to, because they're tired of waiting and they're really praying for me. And so both for the people who are praying for me, who are truly concerned and sincerely concerned for me and for my well-being, and who are praying that the lawsuits and the challenges in Ukraine will come to an end soon, and to those who also want to spite me and reduce me and laugh at me, mock me, scorn me, and as many as the motives might be. I might not actually know all the motives, but whatever your motives are, I just think that I need to give an explanation to my own understanding, an explanation of what is going on to all of you, and both to the friends and haters. So at the beginning of my travels here in Ukraine, I was used to it anyway, because everything I've built here was on the back of this kind of persecution and challenges. But this particular one, when it started, I found it difficult to understand what God was doing and why God allowed it, because it's absolutely bizarre. But because the things that I was being accused of were things that doesn't even make sense. But still, I said, okay, it's one thing if the whole world doesn't know that I'm not guilty of these things, but God, you are supposed to know, and I'm your servant. You definitely know that I'm living for you, and my life is all about you, and so why will you allow false accusation to take hold? And I've been fighting this for the past 10 years now. We have been in court for all these years. And it's not going anywhere, because the Russian government, Ukraine government cannot prove it that I'm guilty, and so, but I don't want to leave the country, on the other hand, without clearing my name. So I need to clear my name before I leave the country. But so I thought it would just take a few months, maybe 6 months or 5 months or 1 year at most. You guess what? 10 years is gone. It all started in 2008. And for that past 10 years, I've not been able to travel out of the country. So what are my explanations? What have I come to discover and understand 10 years later? Number one, I've come, these understandings were coming in stages. So the first one that the first explanation that I had was in connection with Apostle Paul. And that when Apostle Paul was put in prison, it was actually an opportunity for him to develop himself and to find a time of solitude from where he could deliver to the world the revelations and the lessons that God had taught him over the years. And it was also a good time for solitude for him to hear from God and be able to release that message to the body of Christ, to the church, which we now have as the sustenance, for all of us today. If Paul had not been put in jail, we would not have been sustained so bountifully through the scriptures like we do today. because 1/3 of all the Gospels were written by him. And this thanks to him being in jail or being confined to a limited space. So, so that came to me that, oh, wow, okay. And I too had always struggled with a lot of knowledge that God had given to me over the years while I was in communism. And I've been saying, when will I be able to teach all these messages, all this revelation? When will I be able to release them to the world? I've been wondering, when will I ever be able? I thought I would never be able to release these things to the world in my lifetime. Then it just hit me that, oh, wow, why don't I just learn from Apostle Paul? And that's what I did. I began to write books. That's what I started to do. I began to write. Then 2 years ago, I began to do live broadcasts. So as a matter of fact, right now, if you go to my YouTube page, you will see over 6,000, I think over 6,000 videos that are there. That is more than Kenneth Hagin has, more than Kenneth Copeland has, more than Joel Osteen has, more than T.D. Jakes has, more than any preacher of the gospel has. How many videos that we have been able to do? This is coming from my life here in Russia, in the Embassy of God, and the videos that I've been recording day in, day out. Can you imagine somebody doing videos 2 times a day? And not just for every day, but like for every day of the year. And at least once a day. So I have a lot of materials for the world. And I think some people actually think that if I don't do any other thing again for the rest of my life, that will surpass me, the videos and the resources that are out there on YouTube. So you see, I'm a good student of Apostle Paul. But that's just talking about video. But before video, I started writing books, and I started actually doing this in Russian. So I wrote 300 books in Russian. Then when my friends would come, or people would just come to visit our church from all over the world, they'll be saying, we need some of these books in English. And I was not caring so much about the English word that time because I thought God called me to Russia. So people started asking me for English books. And some of them were actually offering me money to translate some of these books from English to Russian because they so much wanted to get to know what are the things that are in those books. So cut a long story short, 2 years later, or 2 years later, right now, I just started writing books in English 2 years later. 2 years ago, massively. I had written, of course, a few like Church Shift before then, and Money Won't Make You Rich, but massively, since 2 years now, we've written over 100 books in English. So I've written 300 books in Russian, and maybe over 100 books in English. This is just of recent, just in the last 2 years. But in the last few years with the Russians, because I started earlier with them, so I had written 300 books in Russian. And so what I'm saying is, that is my first lesson, the lesson I learned from Apostle Paul. But actually, it was not just from Apostle Paul. I actually learned that same lesson from Martin Luther, the Reformer, the Martin Luther of Germany, not Martin Luther King, but Martin Luther, the Reformer. Because, he had an incident very similar to that of Apostle Paul, but his own was quite different. They wanted to kill him. He was under an intense persecution because he was a reformer. He was challenging the doctrine of the church. He was, he was standing against the whole leadership of church in his days. That was 500 years ago. And when things became so intense for him, because he was living amidst and in the middle of people who hated him so much, that to save his life, his friends decided to arrange for his kidnapping. So they kidnapped him without even him knowing he was kidnapped, but they were friendly people who did it. They kidnapped him and put him and hid him away from the public, and the whole world didn't know where he was. They looked for him, the police, everybody looked for him, they couldn't find him. For 3 years, he was in solitary confinement, not like in prison, but like in a village somewhere. But people were taking care of him. So while he was there, that was when he was able to translate the Bible from New Testament, especially from Latin to German. He actually translated them from the original language, from Hebrew, Greek, and so German language was the first one that was translated in modern languages, because that time the Catholic Church would not allow anybody to have the Bible in their languages, only in Latin and in Greek. So he translated the Bible first in German. And then, the result today, every language has their own Bible. It's because of that incarceration that he went through. So when I talk about the incarceration of Apostle Paul, and when I think about the incarceration of Martin Luther, the Reformer, I cannot but rejoice about my own incarceration here in Ukraine, because I think, well. It's not so modest to say, but it's like God is putting me in a good company, right? It's like God is putting me in a good company. I cannot help but think like that. So that's what actually inspired me greatly to begin to write those books and then to do all these videos that I'm doing. Now, a lot of people were asking me, we follow you on Facebook, on YouTube, and a lot of calls have been receiving, people saying, well, thank God that God kept you in Ukraine. If God had not kept you in Ukraine, we wouldn't have discovered who you are, and we wouldn't have had all the liberations that we're enjoying right now. But you know what I really think? When I was doing what I was doing, I was not really thinking about people who are going to watch me or they're not going to watch me. I just wanted to leave some things for history, because if I would never come out of Ukraine, then at least my materials will be out. And if anything that happens to Paul happens to me, at least, I have something to leave as a blessing for the body of Christ. But in the case of Martin Luther, he was actually released, and he did even greater works after his release for Germany and for the cause of Reformation. But recently, I came across, and that's why I decided to do this video, because I'm sure that my days in this behind this iron curtain here in Ukraine, and my days of incarceration is coming to an end. I want to believe that by next year, by the grace of God, I will be released to leave this place. So, but before then, I think, God directed me to come across a story about a Nigerian sage, political sage, and actually a national figure, and someone that is largely regarded to be one of the main fathers of Nigeria, and especially Yoruba people. I'm talking about Chief Obafemi Awolowo. Most people would know him, especially from Nigeria. You could have different attitude towards him, but that guy was a genius. But that's not what I'm going to talk about. But there is a parallel about what happened to him and what's happening to me today. Anyway, to cut a long story short, he was the prime minister or premier of western part of Nigeria at the time. Then the British handed over the government, they left, and then the local politics started. And so then he handed over his place as the premier of the western region and became an opposition leader in the central parliament. So somehow the person he left, who was his assistant that took over the reign of premiership from him, they had some disagreements, and we're not going to go into the details of that now, but at the end of the day, a big conflict happened around the person of Obafemi Awolowo in the western part of Nigeria that almost led to a huge crisis in the country, bad case. So at the end of the day, the federal government of Nigeria decided to charge Obafemi Awolowo to court. They decided to charge him to court. For what, do you think? For treason. They charge him for treason. They charge him for treason. This was like one of the fathers of the nation. He was charged for treason against the very nation that he was building. That reminds me of my own case here in Ukraine, when I'm being charged and accused of robbing my own church that I built myself, but through the help of God. Anyway, so, but he was funny enough, it's not just enough to be charged. In his own case, he was found guilty. He was found guilty. He was actually sentenced. He spent, I think, 6 or 7 years in prison. But he was not only sentenced by himself, he was charged together with some of his leading colleagues, his lieutenants. And one of his lieutenants that were there with him, also charged in prison, was a man called Lateef Jakande. Now, people from Nigeria will also remember that name, especially the older generation. Lateef Jakande was later on became the governor of Lagos State, and actually one of the most successful governors in the history of Nigeria. So this Lateef Jakande, while they were sentencing them, and when Lateef discovered that they found them guilty, he just broke down in the court hall and started weeping. And he was not the only one. There were other men that were also going to be imprisoned. But this kind of shocked Awolowo. And Awolowo was surprised. Why will you be weeping openly like this in court? I mean, we've been fighting like this, and we were ready to give our lives for this cause. Are you crying because of your kids that you are leaving behind, or you are crying because of your wife? You're going to miss your wife? Are you afraid that you will lose your life? What are you crying about? So then Lateef Jakande looked to Obafemi Awolowo and said, no, I'm actually not worried about myself or my family. No, I'm ready to give my life, but I'm crying because of the injustice. I look at the politics of this country, and I see many politicians that are corrupt, people of lesser mind and lesser status than yourself, and that are much more evil, people that are outrightly evil. And they are not being charged for anything. They are not being accused of anything. They are doing well. Actually, they are the ones accusing you and charging you to court today. And that I'm just pained. I'm just angry and just sorrowful about the injustice of life, that you are the best man I know. And the guy was saying, I don't know any Nigerian that is better than you, Awolowo. I mean, I think you are the best Nigerian out there, and you are supposed to be actually ruling this country. And instead of that, they're sending you to jail. So kind of bitter, kind of brokenness. So Awolowo looked at him and, pat him at the back and said, Lateef, you know what I think about it? And this man that Awolowo is special. I mean, you need to go and read about him. I wrote a little about him in my book, Nigeria and the Leadership Question, but he's just a genius. I mean, I'm sure he had some relationship with God as well, because the answer he gave was profound. And that's why I decided to do what I'm doing today. So he looked at Lateef Jakande and said, Lateef, pat him in the back and said, you know what, Lateef? I've thought about this, hard and strong. And let me tell you what I think. I think that God has decided to hide me away in prison. Prison to me is a place of respite, a place where God has decided to put me outside just to keep me out of danger. That God has decided to keep me out of danger. There is a danger that might occur, or something might occur in the country that God wanted me to save me for. And I have a strong feeling, he said, that a day will come when my nation will need me. I have a strong feeling, he said, that God probably has a greater assignment for me than the one I'm presently engaged with. And when that time comes and the danger would have passed, my nation will look for me and get me out of the jail to come and rescue the destiny and the future of Nigeria. That's what Awolowo said. So, now let me tell you what began to happen. A year later, after this guy went to jail, we had our first military coup. One of the coups, one of the several coups that we were supposed to have later on. So at that coup, something tragic that has never happened in the history of Nigeria. Nothing as tragic has ever happened. Very tragic. And what is it? The military guys, these disgruntled military men that came, young men, they came, took over the power, and decided to execute every politician in the land. Can you believe it? I mean, not every politician, but the leading figures, the leading politicians, they were so pissed off by the corruption and everything, they decided to kill all of them, especially the premiers and the so-called founding fathers. They butchered them. They killed the prime minister. They killed the head of the ruling government. They killed the Saudana of the premier of the north. They killed the premier of the east. They killed the premier of the west. The guy that he handed over to, who later on handed him over to the police. The people that convened together to persecute him and sent Awolowo to jail, they were all killed. And he was the only one left who was the premier and was never killed because he was in jail. Can you see that prophetic insight? That guy sensed it. They picked it up in the spirit. That there is an imminent danger that God probably wants to save me from. And that's exactly what happened. He was saved. So he remained in prison. The politicians were dead. The country was in fire. But he was not released. He was just forgotten in prison. Okay. But that was... But a few years later or a few months later, there was another coup. Even though he was not released, but a few years later, there was another coup. And this other coup that came in, guess what? Was also so bad because after that coup, it led to the Nigerian Civil War. And as you know, most of you have heard of the Nigerian Civil War, Nigerian Biafran Civil War. And it was a very bad case for the country because, you know, the country was going to fall apart. You're not going to have any country anymore. And the president at that point, or they used to call him the head of state, was one Yakubu Gowon. He's still alive right now. I mean, you know, Nigeria had never been more prosperous than during the time of Yakubu Gowon. No, Yakubu Gowon, Muritala, and Obasanjo first time. So that was the most prosperous Nigeria was ever. Anyway, so Gowon was the president. But when the war started, Gowon said, there is no way I will ever win this war without the mind of Awolowo. I need the mind of Awolowo. And he said they should go and release him. So that's how he was released from the war. Later on, Gowon was to say that he's one of the most fortunate presidents or head of states of Nigeria. Why? Because I had the greatest Nigerian mind working with me. And as a result, we prosecuted a war that lasted for 3 years and we never borrowed $1. Now, we are neck deep in debt without any war. But even before then, they were in debt. But when this guy came on, Awolowo was so smart, he didn't just bring enough money to the covers of the country, but he also executed a whole war that needed planes were being bombed and things without any, I mean, the money was just increasing in the country. I mean, he was a genius kind of guy. So anyway, so this is what Gowon said, that I had the greatest mind working with me. So I am the happiest president of Nigeria. Then let's not now hear what the opposition leader, the guy that led the war, on the side of Biafra, you know, the guys that fought themselves. Gowon was fighting. Ojukwu is the name of that guy. You know, so Ojukwu is dead now. So, you know, so the head of Biafra and the head of Nigeria, you already heard what the head of Nigeria said, but the head of Biafra said that, you know what, we were opponents with Obasanjo, Awolowo. He was on the other side. And because of him, we lost the war. But you know what I'll tell you about Awolowo? Despite the pain that my people went through, I will not deny the fact that guy, Awolowo, is the best president that Nigeria could have had, but never had. So if both foes and friends were saying something they could commend this guy's geniusity. So what I'm trying to say is that he was right on two things. God kept him away from the danger of assassinations of those politicians. And then, at the time when the nation needed him, they beckoned for him. So when the decision was taken in the government, they call it the defense or whatever, the government took the decision, one of the ministers in the government that time, a very promising, vibrant leader, his name was Muritala Mohammed. And most people will know him because the name of our airport is named after him, and he was assassinated. So anyway, Muritala Mohammed said, I want to go get he's no more a prisoner. I want to go get Awolowo from the prison. Don't let the prison, they have this marina or whatever, come up, some bus to bring him. No. Let me go get him myself. I want to drive him. I want to have the privilege of being his driver. And that's what happened. And later on, Muritala Mohammed was to say one of the greatest experiences of his life was to go to that prison and get Awolowo away from the prison and drive him out. So the guy had successfully seen the future, that a danger would come that God had was going to save me from, and that happened. Then there is a time when there will be a need to rescue our nation, and then my nation will beckon for me, and that's what happened. Well, why am I telling all these long stories? I believe too that God has saved me from danger. He has helped me to be able to write books like Apostle Paul and like Martin Luther, the reformer. And I want to believe that the day will come when God will release me to go back home to be a beacon of hope. My explanation. Peace.